Step into Sci-Fi codes where mystery meets imagination. Enjoy the journey, and don't forget to subscribe. Chapter 1: Shadows in the Void. They were the deadliest beings the galaxy had ever produced. Zerich Doar, the shadow assassin, stood perfectly still, his serpentine frame coiled with latent energy. His dark, iridescent skin seemed to absorb the light around him, making it impossible to focus on his form for more than a fleeting moment. Beside him stood Kroner Zeke, a towering mass of muscle and sinew. His reptilian features were marred by countless scars, each one a testament to battles fought and won. The last of the trio, Zyo Vener, radiated an unsettling calm. Her androgynous, almost featureless face was framed by a faint halo of light, a visible manifestation of her immense psychic power. Where Zerich and Kroner were physical terror incarnate, Zyo was the unseen force that could transform thought into deadly precision. Z's voice sliced through the oppressive silence, smooth yet cutting, demanding absolute attention. "Humanity has become a threat," he began, contempt lacing his words. "They are a species that thrives on chaos, destruction, and greed. In their short existence, they have annihilated their ecosystems, waged ceaseless wars, and now dare to reach beyond their fragile world. The Council has deemed them a plague, one that must be eradicated before it spreads." Zerich tilted his head slightly, his movement snake-like. "Plagues are often inconspicuous, arbiter. What makes these creatures worthy of our attention?" Z stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to fill the room. "Because they adapt. They survive where they should perish. They conquer where they should cower. If left unchecked, humanity will burn the stars themselves." A flicker of interest crossed Zyo's otherwise blank expression. "And what are their defenses?" she asked, her voice a haunting melody that echoed inside the minds of everyone present. "Primitive," Kroner replied, his lip curling in disdain. "But don't mistake simplicity for weakness. They fight with desperation, with a savagery that defies logic. That is why the Council has chosen you, our finest. You will not merely topple their governments or kill their leaders. You will obliterate the essence of what they are. Leave no hope. Leave no resistance." Kroner let out a guttural chuckle, the sound reverberating like a drumbeat. "Finally, a challenge worthy of my blade. Tell me, Arbiter, do they scream like the others?" Z's gaze hardened. "You may indulge your curiosities, Kroner, but remember failure is not an option. Should you falter, the Council's wrath will be your reward." The assassins exchanged glances, a silent agreement forming among them. Zerich, ever the pragmatist, broke the silence. "It will be done. By the time their sun rises thrice, humanity will be a memory." Zerich nodded, satisfied. He raised a long, spindly hand, and a holographic display materialized before them, showcasing Earth in vivid detail. Points of interest, military installations, communication hubs, key population centers were highlighted in crimson. "This is your playground," Z said, his voice dripping with finality. "Now go. Show them the meaning of inevitability." As the assassins departed, their forms dissolving into streaks of light that vanished into the ether, Z allowed himself a moment of stillness. He gazed at the hologram of Earth, his expression unreadable. "Adaptation," he murmured to himself. "Let us see how far it takes you." Chapter 2: The Gathering Storm. On Earth, the atmosphere was anything but calm. The bunker's air was thick with tension, the kind that settled deep into the bones. Commander Daniel Reynolds stood at the head of the steel table, his hands pressed firmly against its surface. Around him, the most powerful leaders of the fractured world argued, their voices rising in overlapping crescendos that echoed off the concrete walls. "We can't fight what we don't understand," one shouted, slamming his fist down. "They're coming to exterminate us, and you want to talk strategy," another retorted. Reynolds straightened, his voice cutting through the noise like a whip. "Enough." The room fell silent, his piercing green eyes scanning the group, daring anyone to speak out of turn. "We've intercepted their message. We know their intent. This isn't about negotiation or diplomacy. This is survival." An older man at the far end of the table, Colonel Graham York, leaned forward. His gritty voice carried the weight of decades of war. Survival against what, exactly? Our intel says these assassins are unlike anything we've ever faced. We can't rely on conventional methods. Reynolds nodded, his jaw tight. Which is why we need to consider unconventional options. The room tensed further. Everyone knew what he was implying, but no one wanted to say it aloud. Finally, it was Carlos Wells, the youngest and sharpest intelligence officer in the room, who broke the silence. You mean him? Reynolds didn't flinch. Yes. Him. A murmur rippled through the group, a mixture of disbelief and dread. York's eyes narrowed. Jonathan Mike is a ghost. Even if we could find him, there's no guarantee he'd help. Reynolds stepped away from the table, his tone resolute. John Mike is more than a ghost. He's our last line of defense. If anyone can stop these assassins, it's him. Wells leaned back in his chair, skeptical. The Baba Yaga? The man who dismantled the Russian syndicate single-handedly? The man who walked away from it all? Enough, Reynolds interjected, his voice firm. We don't have the luxury of doubt. Find him. Bring him in. Convince him, if necessary. York grunted, rising from his seat. If he's still out there, he's not the man he used to be. You're betting the survival of humanity on a broken blade. Reynolds met his gaze, unyielding. A broken blade can still cut. The meeting adjourned with heavy hearts and heavier minds. As the leaders dispersed, Reynolds lingered, staring at the digital map of Earth projected on the wall. Each dot felt like a countdown, a reminder of the limited time they had to prepare. Quietly, to himself, he muttered, God help us if he says no. Chapter 3, The Edge of the Abyss. In the far reaches of space, aboard the stealth cruiser Void Shadow, Zerich, Kroner, and Zyo prepared for their mission. The dimly lit interior of the vessel was eerily silent, save for the hum of the ship's engines and the occasional flicker of holographic displays. Zerich stood at the observation deck, his eyes locked on the distant blue-green dot that was Earth. Their defenses are scattered, Zerich remarked, his voice calm and analytical. It will take precision to dismantle them before they can mount a coordinated response. Kroner leaned against the bulkhead, sharpening a long, jagged blade with practiced ease. I say we strike their heart first. Send a message so loud they won't have time to think about fighting back. Zyo, seated in a meditative pose, opened her eyes. They glowed faintly with an unnatural light. Fear can cripple a species, but desperation can make them dangerous. We must sow confusion, make them question their reality. Zerich nodded, appreciating Zyo's insight. Our objectives are clear. Kroner, you handle their military installations. Zyo, disrupt their communications and infrastructure. I will target their leaders. And what of their champion? Zyo asked, her voice echoing faintly in the minds of the others. The one they seek to bring back into the fight? Zerich's lips curled into a faint smile. If he shows himself, I will deal with him personally. Kroner grinned, baring his sharp teeth. Good. I was getting bored. As the ship approached Earth's orbit, the assassins made their final preparations. Each of them knew the weight of their mission. Failure was not an option, and mercy was a luxury they could not afford. The galaxy had deemed humanity a threat, and they were the instruments of its will. Chapter 4, Shadows on the Ground. Jonathan Mike didn't want to be found. He had built a life of solitude far from the chaos of the world he once knew. In the remote Alaskan wilderness, surrounded by towering pines and endless snow, he found peace. Or so he thought. The knock on his cabin door shattered the stillness. He hesitated, instinct honed by years of combat warning him that trouble had arrived. Slowly, he opened the door to find Commander Reynolds and Carlos Wells standing before him, their expressions grim. You shouldn't be here, Mike said flatly, his voice devoid of emotion. Reynolds didn't waste time on pleasantries. We need you, Mike. The world needs you. Mike stepped back, allowing them inside. The interior of the cabin was Spartan, with only the bare essentials. A small fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. I walked away for a reason, Mike said, closing the door behind them. I'm done fighting. This isn't just another fight, Reynolds said, his tone urgent. It's extinction. Assassins from beyond this world are coming to wipe us out. You're the only one who can stop them. Mike stared into the fire, the flickering flames reflected in his eyes. Memories of battles fought, comrades lost, and the toll it had taken on him surfaced, unbidden. Why me? He asked quietly. Wells stepped forward. Because you're the best. And because you know what it means to face impossible odds and come out alive. There was a long silence. Mike knew that if he agreed, there would be no turning back. But he also knew that if he refused, humanity's chances were slim at best. Finally, he turned to face them, his expression hardening. If I do this, I do it my way. No orders. No oversight. Reynolds nodded. Agreed. And I choose my team, Mike added. Done, Reynolds said without hesitation. Mike let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Then let's get to work. Chapter 5, First Strike. Back aboard the Void Shadow, the assassins launched their initial assault. Kroner's ship descended rapidly toward a military base in the Nevada desert. The alarms blared as soldiers scrambled to their positions, but they were too late. Kroner leapt from the ship, landing amidst the chaos with a thunderous impact. His blade flashed, cutting through steel and flesh with equal ease. Tanks exploded, and soldiers fell before they could react. He moved with brutal efficiency, a force of destruction given form. Meanwhile, Zyo infiltrated Earth's communication networks, her psychic abilities interfacing with technology in ways humanity couldn't comprehend. Satellites went dark, vital information was lost, and panic began to spread. Governments were left blind, unable to coordinate their defenses. Zerich, unseen and unheard, slipped into the heart of the world's leadership. One by one, key figures vanished without a trace, their absence sowing fear and uncertainty. Humanity's first encounter with the assassins was swift and devastating. In the span of a few hours, entire regions were thrown into chaos. The message was clear: resistance was futile. But as the assassins carried out their mission, a new force began to stir. Jonathan Mike had returned, and with him came hope, a fragile, flickering light in the encroaching darkness. The stage was set. The battle for Earth had begun. Final chapter, The Reckoning. The quiet hum of the stealth cruiser Void Shadow drifted across the emptiness of space as it orbited Earth. Inside, Zerich, Kroner, and Zyo made their final preparations. The initial strikes had gone as planned, military bases crippled, global communications severed, and key leaders either eliminated or in hiding. Humanity's response was scattered, fragmented, and desperate. Yet something gnawed at Zerich's mind. Despite their overwhelming success, a subtle tension lingered in the air, like the calm before a storm. He turned to Zyo, who was seated in her meditative trance, her glowing eyes scanning the ethereal threads of psychic energy emanating from Earth. There's something different, Zyo murmured, her voice echoing telepathically through the room. They are afraid, yes, but there's also resolve. A spark that refuses to die. Zerich's expression hardened. A spark can be extinguished. We finish this now. Kroner grinned, his jagged teeth glinting in the dim light. Good. I've been itching for real resistance. Let's see if their champion shows up. Far below, in the heart of a frozen Alaskan wilderness, Jonathan Mike stood amidst a team of specialists he had personally selected. Men and women from every corner of the globe, each with unique skills and a shared purpose to defend their world against an enemy unlike any they had ever faced. Reynolds approached him, his breath visible in the frigid air. We've set up a secure command center. Satellites are back online, thanks to some old tech we pulled from the archives. Mike nodded. Good. They'll strike again soon. This time, we'll be ready. As night fell, the sky above them lit up with unnatural flashes of light. The Void Shadow descended, cloaked in shimmering darkness. Moments later, three figures materialized on the ground: a living shadow, a towering warrior, and a psychic force. Kroner bellowed a laugh, the sound echoing through the forest. Come out, little humans. Let's play. Mike stepped forward, his team fanning out behind him. He carried no weapon, only the weight of countless battles and the resolve of a man who had nothing left to lose. You're not the first to try and take this world, he said calmly. You won't be the last. But you will fail. Zerich studied him with cold, calculating eyes. You must be the champion they spoke of. A broken blade wielded by desperate hands. Mike's gaze didn't waver. A broken blade still cuts. Without warning, Kroner charged, his massive frame barreling toward Mike like a living battering ram. At the last moment, Mike sidestepped, delivering a precise strike to Kroner's side that sent him stumbling. Before Kroner could recover, Mike's team unleashed a coordinated assault, their advanced weapons firing in perfect sync. Zyo raised her hands, a wave of psychic energy rippling outward. Several of Mike's team members faltered, clutching their heads in agony. But then, from behind a ridge, a counter-wave of energy pushed back one of Mike's specialists, a psychic prodigy named Ilara, stood her ground, her eyes glowing with focused power. You're not the only one with tricks, Ilara said, her voice steady despite the strain. Zerich moved with lightning speed, his blade flashing toward Mike. But Mike was faster, deflecting the strike with a makeshift shield before delivering a powerful kick that forced Zerich back. The battle raged on, chaos and precision intertwining in a deadly dance. Kroner's brute strength clashed with the coordinated tactics of Mike's team. Zyo's psychic assaults were met with Ilara's countermeasures. Zerich and Mike circled each other, two masters of combat locked in a deadly duel. Despite their superior technology and abilities, the assassins found themselves facing something they hadn't anticipated: unity. Humanity, fractured and flawed as it was, had come together in the face of annihilation. They fought not as individuals, but as a single, unbreakable force. Zerich felt it, the tide turning. For the first time in his life, doubt crept into his mind. He glanced at Zyo, who was visibly straining to maintain her psychic grip. Kroner, despite his bravado, was bleeding from multiple wounds. This isn't over, Zerich snarled, activating a recall beacon on his wrist. The assassins began to dematerialize, their forms dissolving into streaks of light. Mike watched them vanish, his expression unreadable. He knew this wasn't a victory, it was merely a reprieve. The assassins would return, and next time, they would be prepared. Reynolds approached him, his face a mixture of relief and concern. They'll be back. Mike nodded. And so will we. Stronger. United. As dawn broke over the frozen landscape, the first rays of sunlight cast a golden glow across the snow. Humanity had faced the edge of the abyss and survived. For now. But in the vast reaches of space, the war was far from over. And Jonathan Mike knew that when the shadows returned, he would be there to meet them. Together, they would fight. Together, they would endure. And together, they would prove that even in the darkest of times, hope could still shine. Ready for more? Like, subscribe, and let's keep exploring the unknown together.